Hey there everybody, welcome to Auto Bears, and you join me on the UK launch of this, which is Mazda's new flagship for the UK, the 7-seater CX-80. Now, a couple of years ago, Mazda launched the CX-60, which was a 5-seater SUV, and that was the brand's flagship in the UK and Europe. However, for 2025, they have launched this, the CX-80. Now, it sits on the CX-60's platform, but it's been given a little bit of a pull from the rear end to incorporate those third row of seats. Now, I'm on the UK media launch of this car, so I haven't got it for too long, but what we're going to do is we're going to look around the plug-in hybrid version, but we're going to go for a drive in the diesel version. So yeah, stick with me to find out if the new CX-80 is any good. Now, when it comes to the CX-80 styling, as we can clearly see, yeah, it's very much a Mazda, and it looks pretty much identical to the CX-60 apart from that stretched rear end. You can clearly see the longer rear doors to help with access to the third row of seats. But being a Mazda, of course, it's going to be a very good looking car and is, yeah, instantly recognizable as a Mazda. And yes, you might mistake it, I think, for a CX-60 at a first glance. You will need to see it in profile to distinguish it from the CX-80. But you let me know what you think of the CX-80 styling in the comments section below. Do you really like the looks, or are there better looking 7-seaters out there for your money? You let me know. But I personally think this is a very good looking car. It is a very big car. The wheelbase is over 3 meters long, but I think it is, yeah, very good looking. It just happens to be pretty darn big. And on that note, I think it's time we stop looking at the outside of the CX-80 and we see what they've done with the interior. Sat in the front of the CX-80, you are greeted by a very comfortable, really nicely designed, and actually very old school interior. And by that I mean there are plenty of physical buttons in here, which I know some people will find very refreshing. Not everything's controlled via the infotainment system. Now, because this is a large SUV and you've got a raised seating position, getting in and out of the CX-80 is really easy. So if you do suffer from any kind of mobility issues, then this is definitely one car to look at, because you also get your handle for the driver as well as the front passenger. Then these front seats are electrically adjustable as well. I will put the spec of this car and also the diesel I drive in the afternoon in the description below, so you can kind of see what these cars have got. But there's plenty of adjustment in the seat and they do feel very comfortable, but I will need to drive the car to kind of get a proper idea of how comfortable and supportive they are. But there is a good level of adjustment. I've got adjustable lumbar support for the driver as well, and with the steering I've actually got electric adjustment there as well, which is very refreshing. And then when it comes to interior quality, this is another plus for the CX-60. We got squidgy soft touch plastics here on top of the dash, on top of the doors. We got this kind of faux wood trim here on the door panel, along with some leatherette and some nice contrasting stitching. We've also got that leatherette here with the stitching on the dash, and then lower down on the center console we have got that faux wood. I will probably call it digital wood, like I have done with Nissan cars, because yeah, it's not real, but it does give that effect. But what I like as well is actually there's no piano black plastic in here. Everything does feel of a really nice quality, and like I said, I do like this kind of contrasting stitching, which does come across as well on the air vents. It's something we have seen in other brands. It's not quite copper, but you know, I think you understand what I mean. And we've also got it here on the seats, again with that stitching, so it does liven up the cabin, because otherwise it would be quite dark in here apart from that kind of wood effect trim. So yeah, being sat here in the front of the CX-60, it does feel very upmarket. The materials are really lovely, plenty of adjustment, and I love the fact that there are loads of physical buttons in here, and cubby spaces is too, so you can see my wallet and pen and everything is just hanging out of the cup holders there. Now, speaking of cubby spaces, I'm going to say it's okay in here. There is room for improvement. Now, the door pockets are of a decent size. You can get a medium-sized bottle of drink in there, but surprisingly, They're not lined with any fabric or rubber, so loose items will rattle around a bit. Now on this center console area, which is actually quite broad, it is a very wide center console, up front we have got this little rubber pad, which is also your wireless charging pad, but it doesn't look that big. So I was a little bit surprised when I kind of put my phone there and it did start charging. But with it being rubber lined, yeah, your phone shouldn't go anywhere, and there is a little 12-volt socket next to it. Now just behind there we have got a little lid, which when you open it, yeah, it unveils your two cup holders. They're of a decent size and depth. We have got some plastic grippers for them, but I think if you have got a large bottle of drink, yeah, it's definitely not going to fit in there. It's going to be absolutely fine for a coffee cup, maybe a can of drink, but anything larger than that, you are going to struggle. Then behind there we have got your center armrest with two little buttons that open it up, and it unveils a little bit of space. It is lined with fabric, which is one positive. We've got your two USB-C charging inputs. So you have got things like wireless, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Now I'm not sure if it's because we've got a pack added to this car, but basically some rivals out there have got much more space underneath the armrest. But at least it is lined with fabric. Then we've got the glove box, which surprisingly is not lockable. That is something I thought it would be. But when you've got the glove box open, it is, again, it's an okay size. It is actually lined with fabric and it does feel of a really good quality. But yeah, it's not as big as I was expecting. There is a little bit of kind of like an overhang to the edge, which is a bit deceptive. But even with the book pack in there, there is a good amount of usable space. And then finally, we got a little spot there to put your sunglasses, which is nice. So yeah, when it comes to cubby spaces here in the CX-60, CX-80, I do apologise. I am going to say, yeah, they're pretty good, but in some areas they could be better. I'd love to see some fabric lining or rubber lining to the door pockets, and yeah, a bit more space to the underarm rest and also the glove box. So as I mentioned earlier, it does feel very old school in here with all the physical buttons, and like I said, a lot of people will definitely find that refreshing. So below the infotainment system, we've got a massive hazard button there, but below the vents we have got your dual zone climate control buttons, which are all physical. They got a real nice tactile feel to them, and yeah, it is all really easy to operate. On this particular car we have got things like heated and ventilated seats. We've got a heated steering wheel as well, and you can do things, it looks like, by operating the climate control for the middle row of seats, so that is very handy, especially if you've got young kids there and they can't operate it themselves. We then got the big knob there for the gear selector, your little drive mode select. We have got a couple of buttons for the 360 cameras, hill descent control, and there is one there which I think is in regards to the hybrid mode system. So basically I've got a little picture of a car and a little battery and a voltage sign. And then just behind there we got the operation here for the infotainment system. I'm loving the fact that Mazda have not done away with this. We have got a little rotary dial which also acts as a D-pad, and we've got physical buttons surrounding it for things like going back a page, home, navigation and your media, with a little rotary knob as well to do the volume and change track, and a dedicated button as well so you can assign straight away on the infotainment system. We then got a couple of buttons for your electric handbrake and your auto hold, and then we go on to the steering wheel, which on the left hand side looks to be your media, communication and voice controls, and on the right hand side looks to be your radar guided cruise controls, and I think that's about it. And then we've got a couple of flappy paddles behind in order to change gear. I will say I think there is actually an info button here which you can go through the driver's menu, but I'll have to find that out when we go for a drive later on. And then on the right hand side we have got a couple of buttons to open the fuel filler cap, traction control, and then we've got a couple of safety modes as well as your memory seats and opening the boot. So yeah, when it comes to the physical buttons in here, it does feel very old school. Oh, I forgot there is a giant power button there as well to get the car started. And yeah, it feels very old school, and like I said, a lot of people will find that refreshing. And finally, we've got the infotainment system, the digital dashboard display and the head-up display. And it is a case of the 3x12.3s, because we've got a 12.3 inch infotainment system, a 12.3 inch digital dashboard display, and we've also got allegedly a 12.3 inch head-up display, which, yeah, that's very impressive. Now, I will go on to how these look and feel and operate when we're on the driving part of the review, but I'm just Yeah, really loving the fact that we got 3 large displays. We got that rotary dial, as I mentioned, with the physical buttons in order to operate the infotainment system. And I'm sure, being a Mazda, it's going to be a really lovely, clear and simple system to use when it comes to the digital dashboard display. But again, we're going to save that for the driving part of the review. So yeah, sat here in the front of the CX-80, it does feel very premium, very comfortable, packed full of tech, and yeah, very old school with the physical buttons. It is a very lovely place to be, and I've only been here, well, for half an hour, but yeah, it feels very nice. And on that note, I think it's time we leave the front seats of the CX-80 and we see what it's like for the middle row. Sat in the middle row of the CX-80, it's actually very spacious and comfortable back here with a good level of adjustment and some nice features also. Now, firstly, these doors open to pretty much 90 degrees, which is absolutely brilliant. But on the flip side, they are huge. So if you are in a multi-storey car park and space is quite tight, that could be a bit of an issue. So that's just something to be aware of there. But it does mean when it comes to kind of getting in and out of the middle row and rear row of the CX-80, yeah, those doors will definitely come in handy with the fact that they open nice and wide. Now, once you're sat in here, you do find, like I said, it is nice and comfortable and there's a good level of adjustment. That driver's seat is set to my driving position. I'm 5'7" tall and 5'7" wide, and as you can see, I've got a really good amount of knee room. I can stretch my feet underneath the driver's seat, and headroom is pretty good also. But if you are 6 foot tall and you find your head just kind of rubbing against the roof lining, fear not, because you can recline the seats and you can properly, yeah, stretch out and relax, which is really handy. I will mention though, you could probably get 2 adults in the middle row of the CX-80 because you have got quite a narrow middle seat, and also you have got a transmission hump to navigate over, and it is quite wide. So that's just something to be aware of, but it should be fine for 3 kids. Now, speaking of kids, we got ISOFIX supports on the outer seats. Surprisingly and a bit disappointingly, we haven't got one on the front passenger seat. And I will say as well that you have got some old school plastic covers. So yeah, they are going to be prone to breaking or getting lost when you are affixing a child seat. So that's just something to be aware of there. And I'm noticing they're a bit of a bugger to put back in. So there you go. But yeah, 3 kids should be absolutely fine. And like I said, as soon as you take them out, it just unveils the ISOFIX support. So it should be easy to affix a child seat. Now, cubby spaces, I'm going to say, are okay. We've got some very decent sized door pockets. Again, you can get a medium, possibly even large sized bottle of drink in there. But again, not lined with any fabric or rubber. We have got your aeroplane style pockets on the backs of the front seats. And we've also got a centre armrest, which is nice and wide. It does flop all the way down, but you have got a couple of cup holders in there as well, which is very handy. But that's essentially kind of about it when it comes to cubby spaces, because down here we have got your like tri-zone climate control. We got heated outer seats as well, but there's nowhere to actually store your phone. So it does mean if you've got a charging cable in there, it does mean you'll have to hold on to the phone or perhaps put it into the pocket behind the front seat. And then when it comes to features, as I mentioned, we've got that tri-zone climate control, we've got the heated outer seats as well, and we have got some blinds for the windows, which will be very handy on a hot summer's day. Also, I have mentioned about the fact that the seats do recline, but also with that bench, yeah, it does slide, oh God, really far forward. So that is, yeah, very handy for getting in and out of that 3rd row. Granted, you're not going to have a passenger sat here, but that just kind of demonstrates, yeah, the amount of movement that the seats have. And that's when they are locked into place, but we can get that a bit further back. So yeah, when it comes to kind of being sat in the middle row, there is plenty of space, plenty of adjustment. I would like some extra storage back here, but yeah, for rear passengers, I can't see there being too many kind of issues. But like I said, just don't have 3 adults back here, 2 adults, maybe a child in the centre. And on that note, I'm going to do it. Let's see what that 3rd row is like. Sat in the third row of the CX-80, it's definitely clear that this has been set up for kids and not adults. So this seat here in front of me has actually kind of been pushed forward several inches in order for me to have a little bit of knee room. So it does mean that whoever sat in this seat needs to be around about my height in order to sit there comfortably. If you are 6 foot tall, yet you will struggle. So again, that indication that back here has been set up for kids. But do you know what? It's not lacking in features. We have got some vents back here so we can stay warm. We've got USB-C charging inputs on each side for the 2 passengers. And I've got 2 cup holders as well. Not just for me, but also for my other passenger in the third row. Things that do stand out though, and you can see right there, the seat belt is kind of dangling. And also there's nothing that I can kind of hook it onto. So it does mean getting in and out, you are going to kind of catch that. But there is actually a hook for the seat belts in the rear there, if perhaps you want to put the rear seats down. And yeah, that's about it. I mean, we got a nice little window here, so it does mean we got some light coming in. We have got these little covers, which are for if you want to install some netting, which is very handy. But yeah, that's about it. Now, something like a Hyundai Santa Fe or a Kia Sorento, you do actually have controls to the air conditioning back here. It would be on one side. So it's a little bit disappointing that the rearmost passengers haven't got that kind of control. But again, I think that is an indication this is set up for kids, not for adults. And I will say it could be a little bit dark and gloomy back here if you don't go for a sunroof because of that dark roof lining. But yeah, I do think I could do a short journey being sat back here with another adult about my size. We would have to be kind of, yeah, knees together kind of thing. So I do apologise for showing off my legs there. What can I say? I am proud of them. But yeah, it's definitely set up for kids and not adults. And on that note, I think it's time we leave the rear seats and we see what it's like in the boot. Now, getting the boot open of the CX-80 when all 7 seats are in place presents you with 258 litres of space, which is actually very respectable for a 7-seater car. You can easily get a carry-on case in here or a few weekend bags. Definitely a good chunk of weeks shopping in here, which is very handy. What I love as well is that the boot lip is completely flat. However, the boot is, yeah, it's quite high, so it could make it difficult for dogs to jump in and out of, or if you are loading any large bulky items like a wheelchair or mobility scooter. But here's the thing. It's not devoid of features. We've got plenty of underfloor storage for your charging cables because this is a plug-in hybrid. Also your tonneau cover as well, which is really handy. We've got not 1 but 2 3-pin sockets back here, which is really handy again, plus a 12-volt socket, plus a couple of these little shopping hooks. Again, just really handy in this type of car. Now, to get the third row of seats down, it couldn't be simpler. Just give this little pulley a pull, headrest drops down, and you just push the seat down. And now with this 5-seater configuration, you've got 687 litres of space. You can now incorporate the tonneau cover, so you can keep items in the boot area covered. And that is also a very decent amount of boot capacity. Now, okay, to get the middle row of seats down and turn it into a 2-seater, yeah, you've got to go to the side passenger doors in order to get the seats down. But then the boot capacity does go up to 1,971 litres. So this does turn into, yeah, a bit of a van. So if you are looking to load any large bulky items into the back of your CX-80, you should be able to do so. But yeah, I'm really impressed with the numbers for the boot capacity with all 7 seats in place. I'm loving the amount of features it has. Yeah, the only kind of disappointing thing is that you have to go to the sides of the car in order to get that middle row down. But do you know what? I think it's time we get this boot down, get all the seats up, turn this car into a diesel and see what it's like on the road. Okay, I didn't think it was fair on you guys if I did all my static shots in the plug-in and then didn't tell you about it on the drive. So I've actually gone out for a drive in the plug-in hybrid. So obviously I can compare it to the diesel. But I wanted to focus on the diesel because, well, diesels nowadays are becoming very rare, and it's a 6-cylinder diesel, which is even rarer, but it should be a highlight to drive. So once you start driving the CX-80, first impressions are pretty positive. Now, the first thing I have found when I get going is that this feels big and heavy. It feels like a substantial vehicle. I feel like I'm cocooned and encased in metal. So in terms of a safety perspective, yeah, that is a real highlight. Now, when it comes to visibility, it really is a tale of two halves. Now, the first half is wonderful. Because of that high seating position, I got a wonderful view of the road ahead. I can't quite see where the bonnet drops off, but you do get things like 360 cameras and parking sensors, depending on what trim level you go for. The A-pillars are quite thick and chunky, but surprisingly, I've not found myself looking around them at any roundabouts or junctions on this drive so far. The wing mirrors are of a lovely shape and size, and I have got blind spot monitoring as well, which is very handy. Now for the second half of that tale. When I look over my shoulder, I can't really see much. It's all seats, basically, and if I look in the rear view mirror, it's all headrests. Granted, there is a tiny little square I can see directly behind me. Yeah, seeing behind me is a little bit tricky. I did think I might have something like a rear camera on the spoiler so I can kind of flick a little switch, but I haven't. But when it comes to parking, things like that, like I said, 360 cameras, rear parking sensors, they will help you out. So yeah, looking forward in the CX-80 is an absolute joy. Looking behind me is a little bit of a nightmare. So that's just something to be aware of, especially if you've got your car completely filled up with passengers and things. But anyway, when you start driving the CX-80, it does feel, like I said, big. It feels substantial and feels like a big, solid hunk of metal. Just need to work on that visibility. Now, there are 5 trim levels to choose from in the CX-80 range. There is the entry-level exclusive line, which, well, sounds pretty good and pretty exclusive. You then move up to the Homura, which is what I've got here. Then you have the Takumi. You then have the Homura Plus, and then the Takumi Plus. So it's kind of like, yeah, it's kind of, you've got to take your time going through those trim levels to see what you get in terms of standard equipment. The other thing as well that you can do with Mazda cars is you can add packs to them. And one of them I definitely would recommend for something like the CX-80, because it is a long and big car, is a sunroof. That's definitely something to recommend, particularly if you are going to look to have 7 people in the car, because that way it won't feel quite dark for passengers in the third row of seats. But definitely take some time, go through the various trim levels, see what kind of appeals to you. But if you do go for the kind of base spec car, you get things like 18-inch alloy wheels, and that could be possibly the one I look at for the test drive, or I could go for top of the range and just see what it's like if you go for all the bells and whistles. But yeah, there are 5 trim levels to choose from in the CX-80 range, so just take some time, go through what you want in the specs, and like I said, start adding some options if you feel like it. But like other cars, when you can add option packs, just be aware, yeah, that price is going to go up. So when it comes to powering this PHEV version of the CX-80, under the bonnet, I have got a 2.5 litre turbocharged 4-cylinder petrol engine that is mated to a 17.8 kilowatt hour battery with an electric motor, and the power goes to all 4 wheels. Now, with this being a plug-in, that does mean you tend to get a bit of a boost when it comes to performance, and I'm going to put them all on screen now for you. So what I have got in this particular car is 322 brake horsepower, 500 Newton meters of torque, and that all goes through, like I said, to all 4 wheels via an 8-speed automatic. And it does mean as well that my 0 to 62 time takes around 6.8 seconds. So this big heavy car, yeah, it has got a bit of poke and pace to it. And then when it comes to that electric only range, as I mentioned earlier, it goes up to 38 miles. That will of course depend on your driving style, and I will say probably the weather as well, because during the winter yeah, expect that to drop a little bit. So yeah, when it comes to the performance side of the CX-80, it is pretty admirable. And like I said, for a lot of people, they will want to take advantage of that full electric mode and then really kind of charge the car up at home or at work. You can probably use a 3-pin socket overnight and it should be up to 100%. And then that way you don't have to use that engine up front. But if you do, it's nice to know there's a decent amount of performance there. So what are my first thoughts of the plug-in hybrid version of the CX-80? Well, I can understand the appeal that this is going to have to a number of customers out there, especially when it comes to things like company car tax, the benefits of having that electric only range so you can just go to work and back. I think the average round trip commute in the UK is still around 24-25 miles, so those 38 miles will definitely appeal, especially when you get home, plug it in, and you'll be ready for the next day. And yeah, it's just a really nice kind of comfortable big cruiser. I think the ride needs to be adjusted a little bit. It is quite firm, and I can feel the little bumps and everything there as I went over those ruts in the road. But yeah, I think there is a good appeal for the plug-in hybrid version of the CX-80. It's got a lovely quality interior, and visibility out the front is really good. Just don't try and look out the back. Anyway, onto the diesel. So what's it like when you get going in the 3.3 litre inline 6-cylinder diesel? Well, do you know what? Even though this is less powerful than the PHEV, that noise is just sublime. It's something you can get addicted to. I know diesels for the most part have just been basically lumps in the front of the car to help you get the best economy, help you get 700 miles out of a tank. But sometimes, yeah, you get a diesel which just has a bit of character, makes a nice noise, and yeah, just gives you that nice warm fuzzy feeling in your tummy. Oh, lovely. Now, trim levels remain the same with the diesel as they are with the plug-in. The car I got here is actually exactly the same as what I had with the plug-in. I still got the Homura spec, which is really nicely spec'd. I have got a couple of option packs fitted to this car. I am going to put them down in the description below, like I did with the PHEV. Clearly, one difference you've probably seen with this diesel compared to the plug-in is we've got a sunroof, and it is a pretty decent sized one, which is actually, yeah, I do appreciate that, especially if you have got 7 people in the car. So it does mean you got extra light coming into the cabin, which will definitely help on a long journey. It won't feel so claustrophobic if you're sat in the back there. But yeah, there are 2 new paint colours. Also, there was a kind of pre-production-esque car of the CX-60. It has had some revisions for 2025. Now go onto Instagram for that, and that has also got a new paint colour. I'll put it on screen now. That was, yeah, a really nice car. I do like that kind of green with the contrast and the black. I don't think it would work with silver. So that was really cool, and I did enjoy having a quick drive of that. Granted, unfortunately, I wasn't able to get a video, but you never know. I'll ask Mazda if I could borrow one for a period of time. But yes, with the trim levels, exactly the same. Like I said, I've got the same trim levels I had with the plug-in hybrid, but with this one, yeah, already we have got that sunroof there. Now, just like the plug-in, I will put the details on screen for you, but essentially for this diesel version, of the CX-80. Up front and under the bonnet, we have got a 3.3 litre turbocharged inline 6-cylinder engine. It is also a mild hybrid, I will just point that out. And as you heard earlier, it is, it's absolutely lovely. It gives you a wonderful 6-cylinder thrum. It's definitely a highlight to the car. Now, when it comes to power, it's actually less than the plug-in hybrid. So we have got, and I'll put on screen now for you, 250 brake horsepower, and we've got a mighty 550 Newton meters of torque. And again, like the plug-in, that goes through an 8-speed automatic to all 4 wheels. But something I didn't mention with the plug-in is it actually has a kind of rear-wheel drive bias about it. So yeah, the kind of power going to the front wheels is something that kind of happens a little bit later on. It has got that surge when you put your foot down, from the rear wheels. So I do appreciate that from Mazda, giving it that little sporty edge. Now, when it comes to the 0 to 60 time, it is a little bit below the plug-in. It's about 8.4 seconds, but I still find that very respectable for this type of car. And when it comes to economy, do you know what? I'm impressed, because Mazda claim that this CX-80 should get around 48 to 49 miles per gallon on a combined WLTP cycle. That's really impressive, because this is no lightweight. This is way over 2 tons. And as I mentioned, it is actually as well lighter than the plug-in. So yeah, I am appreciating the weight loss, but I'm also very much appreciating the economy. Now granted, I'm not going to get those figures on a day like today, because, well, I'm doing things like this. And I'm just enjoying it. So, but on a combined, it looks like today we are achieving 38.8. So that is, I think, very impressive. I will point out it's just got a smidge over half a tank remaining, and it is still saying around 310 miles of range. So that is, I think, massively impressive. I'd love to see what a full tank can do and how far you could look to travel. But I don't know, it just suits the CX-80 so much, this engine, and it suited the CX-60 that I drove earlier, only for a quick spin. It is the updated version, but yeah, it just, I don't know, it just works. It kind of works better, I feel, than the plug-in. If I put my foot down, there's a little bit of hesitation there, but I don't feel like it's trying to kind of think about what gear it needs. It's just kind of slight hesitation, goes, right, we need this, and away we go. And then you got that surge of torque, which is what you're going to get from a diesel engine. So yeah, when it comes to powering the CX-80 with the diesel, it's an absolute peach. Mwah. Now, when it comes to drive modes with the diesel version of the CX-80, it does differ a bit to the plug-in hybrid. Obviously, you can't drive in full electric, so that is gone. So you are down to 3. That's sport, comfort, and off-road, because of that all-wheel drive setup. But you can have a 4th one, and that is if you decide to have a tow bar added to your CX-80, and then that way it kind of detects, any swaying action from the caravan or whatever it is you're towing whilst you're driving along, but also in regards to kind of low speed maneuvering, if you do want to put your caravan into a certain spot. So that's just something to be aware of if you are looking to tow with your CX-80. And I will mention, towing capacity, I believe, is around 2.5 tons, which is pretty good. But yes, there are some old school rivals out there which can tow a bit more. Now, when it comes to ride and refinement in the diesel version of the CX-80, I'm going to say, just like the plug-in, it's all right, but it is a little bit on the firm side, and you can feel some of those bumps and imperfections coming through into the cabin, particularly at low speed. Now, as I mentioned, if you go for the entry-level exclusive line, I think I mentioned this on the plug-in part of the review, you do get 18-inch alloy wheels as standard, but on this Homura trim, I believe they've gone up to 20s. And yes, as a result, you do feel some of those bumps and imperfections coming through into the cabin. Definitely, if you go over a pothole or a deep manhole cover, you will get a boom and a jolt. It does tend to settle down a little bit at higher speed, but still, every so often you can get a bit of fidgetiness just kind of coming through into the car. Now, granted, these seats are actually really comfortable. Having driven the CX-80, both the plug-in and now the diesel, for a while, yeah, I am actually really appreciating these seats and that great level of adjustment there. So they do take a bit of the vibration away before it gets to you from outside the car. I am driving on a, I'll say, medium quality road. It's got little kind of, yeah, bits where it does get a bit loud and then quiet again, and then we get a quiet bit, just like that. So you can easily tell straight away that yes, road noise is the big intrusion into the cabin when it comes to refinement. Don't get much in the way of wind noise from the wing mirrors or the A-pillar, so I do appreciate that. You have got a lovely 12-speaker Bose sound system with the CX-80, depending on which trim level you go for. Otherwise, you just get a kind of standard Mazda version. But yeah, I think you'll be absolutely fine for day-to-day driving. Just avoid those potholes, avoid deep manhole covers, and it should be a nice daily drive. So that's just something there to consider. So what about the diesel car's handling? Well, firstly, I love the shape and size of the steering wheel and the quality of the leather. As I mentioned with the ride, it is a little bit on the firm side, but there is a kind of a suppleness to it. So it does mean that when you do chuck it into the corners like so, there is a little bit of roll and lean, but it feels predictable. You kind of know what the car's wanting to do. Now, like I said, this is a bit of a heavyweight, but you've got that all-wheel drive to kind of give you some confidence there. And as I mentioned, there is a bit of rear-wheel drive bias. And just like the plug-in version of the CX-80, there is a good deal of weight in the steering. So as a result, you do kind of feel connected to the car and you kind of feel connected to the road. You don't get the hugest amount of feedback, but it does mean you can kind of chuck it into the corners with a little bit of confidence, and you know everything should be okay. Now, for everyday driving, for the most part, I don't think you're going to have any major issues. But as I said, with that weight, yeah, you might find that if you have to kind of navigate around a multi-story car park on a regular basis, after a week you could have some biceps that could knock out a donkey. So that's just something to be aware of there. So if you are after something that's kind of easier to drive and navigate, say, in a tight car park because you want the lighter steering, there are rivals out there that do provide that. But if you want something that just has a little bit more in terms of kind of sportiness and connection to the road, I gotta be honest, the CX-80, yeah, it hasn't really disappointed. I've really enjoyed the handling in this. It does show the weight of the car, but in some ways, just like with the interior, it's a bit of an old school setup. So I do like that. So what are my thoughts on the new flagship for Mazda in the UK, the CX-80, here on its UK media launch, driving both the plug-in hybrid and this inline 6-cylinder diesel? Well, I'm not going to lie, the diesel has been a highlight. I loved it on the CX-60 and I'm loving it again on the CX-80. In terms of the car itself, I do think it is a very good looking car. The proportions are, for the most part, I think they are really good. Granted, those doors at the back are huge, but as I said earlier, it does mean that getting access to the third row of seats is actually really easy, and that is a definite highlight in a car like this. Even though in the back, and I did see the presentation after I drove the plug-in version, basically the third row of seats, my height is kind of perfect for that third row. So yeah, if you are a taller adult, I'm sorry, but it's the middle row you're going to get relegated to. And yeah, it feels really premium. I love the design of the interior. I love the fact that we still got plenty of buttons in here. Only kind of criticisms, I would say, is the ride. I would just like to see it kind of tweaked and tinkered with. Now, something actually I haven't mentioned from earlier on, the infotainment system and the digital dash. So the digital dash looks absolutely glorious, really nice and easy to use. And if you go through the various drive modes, yeah, it looks really stunning, particularly in sport. And then the infotainment system, using the little rotary knob, for the most part, is really, really easy. But if you do want to use things like Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, just make sure you're parked up, set it all up when you're stationary, and then set off. So it is a case then of set up before you set off. But I do love the fact that we still have an old school rotary knob and all the little physical buttons here to operate it. Now, it's not like a Genesis car where it's kind of set really far back. So I have kind of looked and thought, could I use this as a touchscreen? And well, no, I can't. I have to kind of use the actual little rotary knob. But that's no bad thing. So if I did have a Mazda car, yeah, I would definitely and very quickly get used to that system, which is an absolute highlight. And yeah, sorry, I was just kind of flashing a friend of mine, wrong choice of words, in a Polestar 4. That looks lovely. So yeah, I do absolutely love that system. I love the digital dash. The head-up display is nice and clear, but I'd love to see what additional things I could add to it. And then, yeah, the final thing for me to say is I think this is a very decent 7-seater, premium 7-seater SUV. And if you're looking at the plug-in side, you're definitely going to love the kind of benefit in kind. That will help when it comes to company car tax. But if it was me and I needed a 7-seater, I'd want to jump on this diesel, definitely. But me personally, I would go for the CX-60. I'd go for the 5-seater. I don't need 7 seats. You still get all those great looks. You still get the same trim level setup. But now with the CX-60, it has been tweaked. It has been tweaked and improved. This really is a lovely 7-seater premium SUV. So everyone, whilst I park this particular car, I hope you've enjoyed my first drive of the new flagship car for Mazda in the UK, the CX-80. As always, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, hit those bell notification icons to let you know when I, Dave the Auto Bear, bring out a new video. Don't forget to follow on social media, Instagram, Facebook, X, etc. for additional content, because you will see lots of pics of this, particularly as well with the CX-60. And yeah, I'll catch you all in the next video. And let me know in the comment section below if there are any Mazdas you'd love me to do a full review on, because that will be something I'd love to get on the channel. Not just these first drives, but the actual car for a proper review. So you guys, you can make it happen. But catch you all in the next video. So take care and bye-bye.